Hello. In this video, I will give a brief introduction to the buttons on the toolbar. First, did you know that you could pull the toolbar off and have it float over your window? If you're the type of person who prefers that interaction, you simply click on the left of the toolbar and you can pull it out. Click the X to make it go back. So what do each of the buttons do along the toolbar? Let's just start off on the left side. First, if you hover over the button, you'll get a brief tooltip that will remind you what each button will do. So come and hover over the button and it says this button will toggle between tree or list view in the navigation pane. So let's see what that looks like. There, I clicked it, and it's just a simple back and forth between how the left hierarchy displays. There you go, and if you choose an item here, it gives you an alternative way of navigating through your project. This is sort of the standard display, but this could also be helpful in certain contexts. So that's very simply the first toggle button. The second one is also a toggle button. It toggles between edit mode and view mode. And depending on your access to the project, you may or may not have edit mode, but most project members will probably have edit mode. So the default is to come into the project in edit mode, which means that you can actually make changes to items in the database. And here you'll see that that item changed, but let's go ahead and change it back to just Durham. So I'm in edit mode right now. That's why I was able to edit that. By clicking on the Eye of Horus, I switch over to view mode only. And so you see when I navigate to another item, it comes up in view mode and I don't have any options for editing. This is helpful sometimes if you're really just trying to navigate quickly through items and view them. You don't want to be in edit mode first and have to click the view tab. You can just click from item to item and it'll automatically go into view mode. Sometimes it's helpful if you're working through photos or things like that. You actually want to see the view of the item right away. Just click on this thing, and when the feather shows up, you're in edit mode. There we go. See, I'm back in edit mode, and here I could edit to begin. So that's a toggle between edit and view mode. The next button is a way for you to mark the item that you're on and essentially to bookmark it for quick navigation. Clicking on the green star will add an item to this little toolbar down here at the bottom. So I've already clicked on one item. And the idea here is that you're working on an item that you want to quickly come back to. Like, you know you're going to have to navigate away and do some other editing, but you want to quickly come back to this item. And just clicking on that button will bring you back to the item that you have bookmarked. The red star is a little bit different. This is if you know you're going to be working on a specific database item for a long time, and like for an entire day perhaps. Maybe it's a text item or a very large locus for an archaeology project. And you really just want to make sure that nobody else comes along and starts editing that item while you're working on it. Say, for example, I was editing the Umayyad Mosque in Damascus, and I was adding properties and things here, but I knew I needed to navigate away. And I wanted to make sure that none of my other project members came along and saw my partial work here and maybe tried to finish it or tried to make corrections. If I click this red star, that'll just reserve this item for myself, and when anybody else navigates to it, they'll just get it in sort of a view mode and they won't be able to edit it. Honestly, there's probably not too many times that you'll need to use the red star. The green star I find very helpful, just to be able to quickly navigate back to an item from no matter where you're at. Okay, the next two items are also very helpful, just to quickly expand and contract an entire hierarchy. That's what these two buttons do. So the minus button just takes the entire hierarchy and brings it back down, collapses it, and the plus expands it. Now you have to be sort of careful here. If you know that the hierarchy has thousands and thousands of items, you might not want to expand the entire hierarchy. Now we get into some really commonly used buttons. And these are for adding new items to the database. So let's say, for example, I'm working in locations and objects. I want to add a new place under Egypt. I could do that with this button. And again, I'm hovering over the button to see that it's insert new item as sub-item below the selected item. There we go, and it added a new item in there. And here I have all of my regular options for adding properties, descriptions. First I need to give it a name before I can give it an alias. There we go, and I could add an alias by doing that. So that was add below. Now what if I want to add something immediately above this selected item? I could do that here. Very simply, it's going to add it right above. There we go. Same thing for add below. Very simple. Come up with whatever name you want to. This button is very helpful if you know you're going to be adding many items that are somewhat similar. Like, say, for example, if I were to start adding properties here, this is a location, it's an object. Let's say it's a geographical region. I'll click Save there. Now I can add as many duplications of replications of that item as I would like. So let's say that I know I'm going to add 4 new places. There I have my 4 places added, and I can go back and customize them as needed. The next 2 items, probably you won't use all that much. These allow you to copy in items from other locations. So if I were over here looking through my locations and objects, if I wanted Paris for some reason to be referenced in Egypt, I could do that by clicking this button, and Paris would show up there. Now if I wanted the exact same item to show up in this new context, that's what this next button does. So it's repeating the same item I have selected over here. It's not a copy of that item, it's actually the same item. And you'll see how the text shows up in red. That shows that it's a copy of the same item exactly. Now let's skip ahead to this, the delete and remove button. Since I've added quite a few items here, I'd like to go ahead and clean up after myself. Especially we'll start off with some of these crazy locations I made in Egypt. So what I did there is I selected the top one, held down my shift button, selected the bottom one, and now I'm just going to go and delete those. And OCHRE wants to just make sure I'm going to remove all 6 of these items. Yes, I would like to remove them. So now it's just going through and making sure that it's not, that these items aren't linked to something else in the database. It's going to try to save me the trouble of making a mistake. So it's just told me, okay, I've removed all 6 of those. None of them were failed to remove. So what about these items that occur in multiple contexts? These are the ones I just added with these 2 buttons. So it is reporting to me that Paris is occurring in these 2 contexts. This first one is down here, Paris. The second one is where I added it here in Egypt. So what happens if I hit the X button there? It's going to say, do you want to proceed with removing Paris? So the key word here is removing instead of deleting. So what it's doing is it's looking at the location that I'm currently in, and it's just going to remove it from there. And notice it's still down here in Europe. It didn't actually delete the item from the database, it just removed it from this one context. And the same thing will be true for a cloned item. It's just asking me, are you sure you want to remove it? I did. There we go. Okay, so working back to these buttons, this next button is somewhat a special purpose tool. And this is really for projects that deal a lot with tablets. So let's say, for example, we found a tablet at Elephantini, and that we were lucky enough that it was an Aramaic text on the tablet. This button will insert the standard repertoire of surfaces on the tablet. I'll just go ahead and show you what that's going to do. So it's going to do the obverse, reverse, upper, bottom, left, and right edges of a tablet. It's just sort of a shortcut tool to quickly insert these things. And as you can see, the Persepolis Fortification Archive project uses these variables and values quite a lot. So once again, I'm just going to simply clean up after myself by selecting a range of items and deleting them. Doesn't matter if there's properties on there, I'm free to delete them, and OCHRE again is just checking that they're not linked to anything like images or other locations. So there we go. I've cleaned up after myself. Okay, so that's the stamp button. So it's natural sometimes that you're going to want to rearrange things in your database, and that's what these next buttons do. So let's look at the up and down buttons. Those are pretty simple. I just moved Elephantini above Thebes, and the next button just moves it below Thebes. Pretty simple. Now this button is a little bit more serious, because what you're saying is that I would like to move this selected item one step higher in the hierarchy. So that wouldn't really be appropriate to move Elephantini to the same level of Egypt, because the idea here is that the higher items contain the lower items. But let's just say, for example, that I was inserting a new item underneath Egypt, and I realized, well, it's not quite appropriate for Nubia to be contained by Egypt. Instead, I would like it to be at the same level as Egypt. There, I just clicked that button and it moved it, took it out of being a contained element underneath Egypt and made it a sibling item of Egypt. Once again, you can see how easy it is to delete things. Here again, you'll notice it's deleting Nubia because it knows that it doesn't exist anywhere else in the database. The next button is the simple refresh button. If you find that you're doing a lot of work and you would like to just make sure that you've got the freshest copy of that data from the database, you just hit that refresh button, and that includes refreshing the list of items underneath a location. Like you just saw that this expanded just to show that, okay, OCHRE went out to the database, got all the most recent information it can from the database. Moving on for the last few buttons here. You can see we have our panes open on the right side here. We have our link manager pane and our query results pane. And you can see that those two are shown to be open here, and these are very simple toggles. You can open and close them as needed. I show you that first because this next button is going to change the orientation of these panes. You'll see maybe you prefer to have them down here. That's simply all that button does. And maybe you prefer to have them floating over the top. That's what that next button does. So that leaves us with just this little F button, which is the text formatting tool. And I won't go through all of the details in here. Chances are, if you're working in a philology project, a text project, you'll get into these buttons, but I'll just give you a very basic introduction. The F opens up this sub-toolbar, which allows you to work with various languages and various keyboards. So here, for example, is just a default transliteration keyboard, but I could switch over to a simple Greek consonantal keyboard or a full Greek keyboard with all the various accents, or possibly you're working in Hebrew, Aramaic, or Phoenician. So that's just very briefly what the text formatting toolbar does. So I think that's everything along this toolbar. Thanks for watching, and hope you found this useful.